and welcome to this episode of SelfKind with me, Erica Webb. Today I want to talk about this idea of orienting ourselves towards something. And we're going to talk all about plants, flowers, nature, and use this little analogy to help us see a different way of tending to our needs that might feel quite supportive. So this episode is inspired by a little moment that I had sitting on my front step outside. And as I was sitting on my front step the other day, I noticed we have this lovely little plant that started off as this tiny little plant that I bought from Bunnings and had these purpley flowers, and I bought it to add a little bit of color to the front door. And I didn't think it would last that long. I always thought that potted color just sort of lasted for a short time and then died. I just don't think I was looking after it very well. Anyway, this plant has thrived, and it is big and it's bushy and it kind of loses its flowers and then they come back and it has to be trimmed back. It's magnificent. I love it. And as I was sitting there, the light was hitting that plant in just the most beautiful way. And it occurred to me, not surprisingly, but it was one of those moments where, you notice those things that you're like, this is not new to me. This is not new information, but it just hits you in a different way. And I noticed the way that the flowers and the plant in general was oriented toward the sun. We know this, right? We know that plants grow towards the sun. We know that flowers turn to look towards the sun. But it really struck me in that moment, the way that the whole plant was growing in the direction of the sun. And the flowers were all turned to face towards the sun. And I thought, isn't that interesting? The way that plants just intuitively know to orient toward the thing that supports their growth. And what would it be like if we also chose to turn toward the things that support our growth and our being, right, in the world? Sometimes I don't like to use the word growth because I think sometimes for some of us at particular times in our life, we're not necessarily looking for growth. We're just looking for peace or comfort. And so what would happen if we oriented ourselves toward those things that gave us that, much the same way that plants orient towards the sun? Now, I posted this on Instagram as well after having this little moment in the sunshine. And one of the things that I wrote in my caption was around this idea that at various points in my own life, I've oriented myself toward different things. And there have definitely been periods, significant periods, where I have oriented toward my own martyrdom and my own suffering. And that's not actually a hard thing to do. It's not hard to orient toward suffering. It's not hard to orient toward our own martyrdom. I think sometimes it actually takes greater effort to orient towards support. And there's a few reasons for that. Reasons that we've definitely talked about on this podcast before, but I think are always worth repeating. And some of those reasons are the fact that the messaging that we receive often speak to this idea that we have to earn our worth, that we have to prove our worth, that we have to suffer in order to win, that we have to suffer in order to be worthy, that it is better for us to be selfless than selfish, that it is better for us to meet other people's needs over our own. And so it's not always actually that hard to orient towards suffering or to orient toward things that are outside of ourselves that aren't actually supportive to how we feel. And then there have been other periods of my life where I have oriented more towards my version of the sun to those plants, those things that feel supportive, joy, rest, nurture. The list is long, but those are a few of them. And the orienting in that direction has at times been more effortful, but far more supportive and, dare I even say, transformative. And one of the things that's super interesting about the way that plants do this is that they don't only do it when times are good. So plants don't only orient toward the sun when they're like, well, I'm totally like, this is fine, everything's good, there's no shortage of resources for me, I'll orient to the sun now that things are fine. They orient towards the sun always. And so we see these beautiful plants that have grown in the most unlikely scenarios, trees that have fallen over and then grown up despite, anybody's best guesses. Little extra branches shooting off because they're, in the best possible position to go and grab that sunlight and those nutrients and all of that stuff that plants need to grow. They do not require a good reason to orient toward the things that support them. It's their default. Imagine if it was our default. Imagine if it was our default to orient towards the things that support us, the people that support us, the resources that support us, the practices that support us. Knowing that we don't have to earn them, that we don't have to prove ourselves for them, that it is our absolute default birthright. And I think that is a very different way of looking at self-care. How do I orient myself towards the things that support me? Not once everything is perfect, not once I feel like I'm completely worthy and deserving and I've done all the things, but as my base level of self-care. Kind of like that plant at my front door, or any plant that you can, go and look at. I don't think much more needs to be said about that. I think it's really self-explanatory, and I think it's a super helpful example, and I hope it feels really helpful and supportive to you as well. As you move into your week, or whatever stage you're at in the week, this is coming out on a Thursday, so maybe it's the tail end of the week, maybe you're listening to it on a Monday, it doesn't really matter, but as you move into your day, as you move into your week, can you get curious about that out in nature? To look at all of the ways that nature defaults to orienting itself towards what supports it. You can even go the other way, right? Roots. They're not going to not be growing those roots into the ground to get the nourishment from the soil that they need. How can you use that example to just remind you as you move through your day, as you move through your week, as you move through your life? How do I orient myself towards the things that support me? Always, not just in those moments where I feel like everything else is sorted and now I can choose me. All right, I hope that's helpful. I will look forward to seeing you again really soon.